Hey, this is Travis Wayne Goodsill, and I've got two potential videos, and of course I've got to label them with some shocking title that will get people curious and want to click on it, but even that is a struggle, as I've learned with the LDS General Conference and Brett Kavanaugh and all that. So it's tough to get through to people. I do a lot better on my website, but maybe it's just because YouTube shadow bans me, which is the most likely scenario. I have two potential videos. I have 3.5 hours before General Conference, where I'll most likely be going on a rampage again as to all the changes in doctrine and the shocking cancellation of what members are used to. I mean, who knows? Maybe today will be the day that the temple ceremony will be closed down and altered. And so, yeah, it's clear that I was able to drum up new visitors to my YouTube videos yesterday, because one girl saw my first video about President Nelson canceling church and didn't understand why I was laughing, and she thought that was horrible that I would laugh over that. And then, so that you all know, and you can go to the video and look at the comments, it's still there, she blamed the Mormons for the problems. That's right. The woman blamed the Mormons, not the leaders of the church who are the ones making the decisions. She blamed the members. What do you say to that? Well, I replied, definitely, but it's just unbelievable, the thinking that goes in the heads of people. You know, where do they get it from? Oh, that's going to be my discussion today. So, why the church betrayed me? I was born and raised in the church, if you haven't figured that out by now. Both my parents were members of the church, lifelong. They both come from pioneer families. Only my mom has her dad's side, who were converts to the church. Most of the rest, well, the Goodsills also were converts, but all the rest of the lines are pioneer ancestry. My mom is an alt-right, white conservative Mormon. It's that simple. So yes, I was raised up in an abusive household. And you think, no, women are precious and they're children of God and they're doing the best they can. Not when they have alt-right thinking. And people don't understand. You know, we grew up paranoid, in fear. And my brother, so that you guys understand context, he grew up believing that he could only play church hymns on the piano. No other music, just church hymns. He went to BYU, and those evil BYU students tricked him and convinced him that classical music was okay also to listen to and play on the piano. Wow, he's lowering his standards. And then he went to Michigan after graduating at BYU, And of course, Michigan said, "You have too much of a Mormon bias. You're not being objective in your reports." And of course, my brother didn't understand. But his peers lowered his standards even more in regards to aesthetic musical preference. And he started to get involved in worldly music. Ooh. And he was trying to justify, justify, can you believe that? Justify liking the City of Angels theme song. The Nicolas Cage, I can't remember the woman, Nicole Kidman? I can't remember. Anyway, that movie, In the Arms of the Angel, you know, I cried during the movie because that was just tragic. You know, the guy sacrifices his angelic standing to become mortal and to have a relationship with a mortal woman, and then the woman gets in a altercation with the vehicle and dies. And so now he's left on Earth as a mortal, and they try to soften up the ending by him saying, "I don't regret what I did." Dude, you lost the love of your life. And so it's a tragedy, and they messed it up by him saying that he was okay with it. But yeah, I mean, that's the alt-right Mormon conservative viewpoint. You know, they don't. It's so frustrating. You know, my brother believed he would lower his standards if he listened to other music, aesthetic music, classical music. There's no words in it. But of course, Mozart in his day was, oh, demon music. That's inappropriate. That's wild and out of control. You know, that's the mindset of alt-right conservatism. And Mozart rose above that to become a genius, even though he was persecuted. But yeah, I mean, that's my brother for you. And then my sister, she was the wild one. And she was the middle child. And so she wanted to make sure that she was equal to her older brother. I didn't want to challenge any of the kids. I was just, you know, when school said you need basketball shoes to play basketball, my parents bought me basketball shoes. But my sister, she had to be equal, and even though she wasn't on the basketball team or any other team, she needed something of equal value so that she can feel equal. And then she took it to the extreme and made sure that she had more than me. That was the competition that she thought that she had to have with me. And so yeah, there's tension in the family because of the greed and the selfishness of my sister, who's the middle child. And then the younger sister than her, she was a self-abuser. When she got angry, she would beat herself. She'd throw temper tantrums and start hitting herself. And so she was a shy recluse. And that was a little weird, but she was 4 years younger than me. 1 year, 2, yeah, around 4 or 5 years younger than me. And so she wasn't really in the picture in my life. And then 17 years later, my parents tried to have another baby, and there I am in the nighttime watching my TV shows, and I'm hearing the bed in the master bedroom upstairs shaking and rattling for 30 seconds. That was disturbing. And then worse, to have my mom start saying, "Shh, the baby's sleeping. And we're like, huh? Whatever. But, yeah, when you're in a Mormon household of alt-right conservative thinking parents, and my dad wasn't. My dad grew up a Democrat. And so when he thought my mom was a hottie, he was going to the University of Utah, and my mom was working in the area, so that they were in the family home evening group in the singles ward. My dad and my mom would get into arguments over President Benson, or Elder Benson at the time, who was talking radical ideas about government, and they would argue over who was right, and go to conference on a date to see what President Benson would say that would shock the Mormons, and he didn't, and they were disappointed, but he made up for it as a president of the church. Women need to be barefoot and pregnant in the home. So, good times. And so, yeah, it's all about controlling kids in an alt-right conservative family. You control the kids' behavior. They must conform to your will in an alt-right conservative family. And people think, well, what's wrong with that? Kids need discipline in their life. No, you don't control their actions. You know, they're the alt-right conservatives put babies in cages because they don't want to teach children how to learn and develop and grow and experience life. Instead, it's all about conformity. And so I was the rebellious child. But that's the kind of household that alt-right conservative Mormons have. And in a religious group, the theology of Mormonism is that Lucifer is the brother of Jesus and the brother of all of us, because we're all children of Heavenly Father. And the theology is that Lucifer rebelled in the pre-existence, or the pre-mortality, and he wanted to save all mankind and become the Jesus Messiah for everybody. In order to do that, he said, hey, we'll just take away agency so that people will be forced to be obedient, so that there's no choice in the matter. And so Mormons know that you don't take agency away from other people. You don't conform other people to your will. But when you have a religion that says that you got to be obedient to the commandments, they start justifying taking away agency, and the commandments become Luciferian plan of salvation, to use the Mormon term. And Mormons then get paranoid over drinking caffeine, because the word of wisdom, which was just a word of wisdom in the beginning, it was not a commandment until Brigham Young said it's a commandment. And he then, of course, had built a brewery and had a tobacco plantation. But Mormons get paranoid over caffeine, and BYU to this day still will not sell caffeine on their campus because of that initial paranoia of conforming to commandments to take away agency. And So the For Strength of the Youth pamphlet, it's all designed to take away agency of the youth. And the church covers it up by justifying it, saying, oh, these will draw you closer to the Spirit, and you'll come in harmony with God. That's exactly what Lucifer said. I will be your God. I will force you to be good, and you'll all get back to the presence of Heavenly Father. That was his plan, and Mormons are following Lucifer's plan. The leaders are enforcing Lucifer's plan, and Mormons don't see it. They don't make the connection. And so when you go to stores here in Utah, where the mother has to take the kids to the store with them, and the mother passes by the candy aisle, the kids naturally freak out. Mom, I gotta have that. I want that, Mom. Can I have that, Mom? Mom, Mom. No, you'll ruin your dinner. And the kids complain and throw a fuss right there in the store. And the parent, we're supposed to empathize for the parent. And because the parent is like, oh, woe is me. My life is so hard taking care of kids. You have 2 kids. You are nowhere near the struggle of our pioneer ancestor moms who had 12 to 15 kids. It's just unbelievable. You teach your kids. You let them learn about life. They're brand new into mortality. Everything is new for them. And if you just ignore them and expect them to learn everything on their own, why are you then blaming the kids for when they behave in a manner that you don't like? And then you punish them by restricting them from learning. TV was my learning tool. My mom was too busy with housework to raise me. So fortunately, Sesame Street came on the air in 1971, and so my mom placed me in front of the TV to occupy my time. Sesame Street, great educational tool, but it taught me that, hey, TV is an educational platform. And other people who try to say that it's just entertainment, they don't learn anything from TV, that's just the conflicts that happen when new technologies arise. When books emerged, people were saying, books are evil, they must be burned, they're the work of the devil, they're teaching people to go astray. And so then TV comes out, it's the work of the devil, it's making people dumb, it's taking people away from Jesus, and they need to read books, that's where you learn things. And you still hear the arguments today, oh, the book was better than the movie, man. And then the internet comes along, and everybody forgets about TV and magazines. So that's the alt-right conservative mindset. They take away agency. Here in Utah, it's hypocritical because the religion, as originally taught but is no longer taught, said Lucifer's plan is to take away agency, to compel people to behave and conform to a certain way of life. And leaders of the church pick up on that and use that on the membership because that's the way they're raised. And in the Book of Mormon, there's the story of King Noah. He takes over the throne, and he's a bad, wicked man. You know, he has multiple wives and concubines, and he's hoarding his money and wealth, so the people are poor. And you know, they have drunken parties, and according to Abinadi, who uh, talks to them or is arrested as a terrorist and a mentally ill person, he he exposes that they're not following any of the Ten Commandments. So we see that they're stealing and murdering and all sorts of other things that is not directly talked about. And yet the king and the priests and the people are like, no, he's a good man. He's inspired of God. And that's the concept that people don't get when you have religious leaders, because that's what King Noah was. He was a religious leader and a government leader. And in churches, the pastor in the church is the prophet. They claim to speak for God, and people just believe whatever they say because who knows why? For whatever reason, people get fooled into believing that the man speaks for God when he takes away your agency and violates what Jesus did in the New Testament Gospels. But yeah, when you have leaders who are corrupt, that results in the people, the followers, saying, hey, great, we can do that too. And then the people do what the leaders do. Do as I'm doing, follow, follow me. That's a Mormon primary song, in case you don't know that one. And that's what we're seeing with Trump. Trump comes into office, and he is wild and radical, racist, sexist, bigoted, xenophobic, hates poor, and he just goes off, lying after lying after lying after lying, and commits abuses and violates the Constitution, locks babies in cages, and then puts a sexual predator on the Supreme Court who's going to overturn all of our laws and send us into the dark ages of slavery and protect Trump to make him king for life. And you know what happened? You know, the Republicans went along with it. At the beginning they were like, we're not sure, this isn't really our platform. And now they're gung-ho and they're sacrificing their careers to protect Trump. And they're following his pattern. The new Republicans that are running for office are using Trump tactics, Trump propaganda in their campaign ads. And the people, Trump's followers, you know, they're going psycho now. You know, Charlottesville is the famous example of what Trump is actually doing to our nation. The nut job gets in his car and thinks it's okay to run into the protesters of the white supremacists and kills a woman for it. That's what Trump is doing to our nation. That's what happens when you have corrupt leaders in power. It corrupts all of society. And that's what the Book of Mormon is teaching with the King Noah story. And that's what happens in the Mormon church. When the leaders of the church promote, for example, the family proclamation. You heard it yesterday in the conferences. They referred to that over and over again. The family proclamation was thrown in my face in my first marriage. You know, my wife at that time wanted a white picket fence, little house isolated from the big bad society, and she wanted her own car so that she could travel to the city to go shopping. And I had just barely graduated. You know, I had a full-time job, great benefits, for a family and was working overtime because it was the Christmas season coming up. But it still wasn't paying enough to get out of the debts from student loans and her student loans. I was paying for both student loans. And she couldn't understand the concept of you can't just say, hey, I'm going to go buy a house. Going to have, a car for you. Everything is happy, prosperous. You have debts. American society requires us to pay off our debts. We are slaves to the system. And that's where credit cards and loans come in. Hey, get what you want. But the family proclamation says the husband is responsible for the care and the maintenance of the family. And so when you have an alt-right conservative mindset in the church, that gets twisted into its interpretation. Because I had a full-time job. What more did they want? Oh, yeah, my bishop said, you need to quit your full-time job and get a better paying job. Wow. That's the alt-right conservative Mormon mindset. You are not a good father until you are wealthy and giving your wife and kids everything they want and need, so that the wife can stay home and socialize and go shopping while you slave for a wealthy lifestyle. And in our society, the only way to become rich is to be criminal. And I've done the ransom economy video, so you can go to that one and see what I'm talking about. Our whole society, not just in Utah, but in the United States, is all based upon ransom economics. And you know what a ransom is. Somebody kidnaps somebody you love, and you get a call from the kidnappers saying, hey, give us money or they die. That's a ransom. And that's done in our economy. And Utah is hypocritical on that. Gambling is against the law because the church says no gambling, but then they're all about insurance. You must have insurance. Insurance is gambling because you're investing in something with no guarantee of a return on your investment. And that's the mindset of alt-right conservatives. They justify taking away people's rights, agency, so that they can prosper over the other people. And that's what the government does. They're touting how great Operation Rio Grande was. It's where they scattered the homeless away from downtown, where the gateway is, where the business owners were complaining about they didn't like the homeless hanging around their stores because it was chasing away their customers. And so instead of elevating the homeless, Utah says, we'll scatter them. That's the alt-right mindset. We'll solve the homeless problem by killing them off. No more homeless problem, all better. We are chosen of God. That's the alt-right mindset. They arrested the homeless, threw them in prison, in jail. The jumpsuits in jail say prisoner on the back of them. But that's the alt-right mindset. Security over rights. And it's shocking how people fall for it. We want protection. Protect us. We'll sacrifice our rights. And then their rights are taken away, and they're protected, and then they complain. Hey, we want rights. Well, you're going to be hit by a falling plane. We need to protect you. Those terrorists are evil. And so then you get the Les Miserables syndrome in Utah and in the rest of the nation, where people have to steal food in order to survive. Okay, so with that context in mind, taking away agency when you preach having agency. This was the environment that I grew up in. And so when I moved to Utah after I graduated, I was thinking that I was going to be, inferior to Utah Mormons. I thought that, being in close proximity with the prophets, they would be so much more spiritual, so much more intelligent about the gospel, and that I was going to have my work cut out for me to try to keep up. And then I get here, and then I find out I'm far superior than everybody. That was a big disappointment. And I'm serious. Humility is not debasing yourself. Humility is telling the truth. Jesus was humble when he said, I am the Son of God, because he was telling the truth. He was humble. Everybody else said, you're not humble, you're blasphemous, and blah, 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 you're a wicked man. Yeah, okay, whatever. We're supposed to learn from the scriptures. And I'm watching The Legend of Zorro as I'm talking here. So, yeah, Catherine Zeta-Jones just smacked her husband, Antonio Banderas. Antonio Banderas? Yeah. In the public setting as they're dancing. And it's so that she can then get in with the evil man and blah, blah, blah. You've seen the movie, I'm sure. Okay, so Mormons take away agency, even though they talk agency. And that goes into the Isaiah prophecy that Joseph Smith reiterated in his first vision. They draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. That's exactly what it is. They talk the talk of agency, but their actions reveal what they're truly thinking. Take away agency. Get people to conform to the church standards. And you heard that yesterday. That member of the 70, Piper, he said, church is equal to the gospel. So whatever the church does is the gospel of Jesus. And so if you don't believe the church, then you're not believing Jesus' gospel. That was his logic. You can read it or listen to it, watch it again for yourself. That was pure evil. Because what about other churches that claim the gospel and that their church therefore is one and the same with the gospel? So then we're faced with the dilemma that Joseph Smith had. Which church is true? And Mormons don't realize that they too are also placed in that scenario, not just with other churches, but within Mormonism itself, because there are many different beliefs within Mormonism. And yesterday, Mormons were faced on a couple of occasions of having to choose between the Book of Mormon or the living current prophet. And two prophets, Irene and Nelson, put Mormons in that conundrum, that dichotomous decision. It's either the Book of Mormon or me, they were telling Mormons. And of course they word it so that Mormons don't catch on. Mormons have to actually have had studied their Book of Mormon to know that that's what they were doing. So when President Irene talks about Eve being the one to blame for the fall, if you are a good Mormon and had studied your Book of Mormon, you would know that the Book of Mormon says that Adam fell, that men are that they might have joy. And then I was trying to tell you to go to Doctrine and Covenants 2940. After looking at the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants reinforces that in the Book of Mormon. And so Mormon doctrine is supposed to be Adam fell. But not a single Mormon knows it or believes it. And why? Because they take away agency. The Ordain Women, the church made sure to cut off the head of that organization and excommunicated the leader. They don't want women's rights. You know, they're placating women by having their own special session on Saturday now in October so that the priesthood don't have their session. But Mormons don't get it. They don't really care about having sessions at all. Priesthood sessions, women's sessions, even the general sessions, they don't care. It's all about conformity. They get up in conference, they tell Mormons how to behave, and they must conform or they're wicked. The Ten Commandments is a summary of the major sins that people commit, which Deuteronomy says it's all about love. Jesus reiterates it with the story with the lawyer. Love. And yet Mormons twist it so that if you drink Mountain Dew or Coke or Pepsi, you're evil. You're violating God's law. And God will punish you and keep you out of the celestial kingdom. And Mormons use that line. You know, saying, a person would say, God wouldn't kick me out of the celestial kingdom for having a drink of Pepsi. And then the Mormon, who thinks he knows better, would say, why would you allow Pepsi to keep you out of the celestial kingdom? And then there's the famous chewing gum analogy that's been used for women in the church, that if they get raped, they are like used chewing gum, and they can no longer receive God's grace and mercy because they're now used. They're evil and horrible. That's alt-right conservative thinking. Women who are raped are used chewing gum. And of course there was a movement trying to do away with that analogy, but yeah, it's still in the minds of the people. You know, even when the white supremacist murdered the girl with his car, white supremacists still cheered. It was inside, you know, inside their hearts that they were cheering. They didn't do it openly. Evil needs to be eradicated from the heart. And it just can't be done by forcing people to be good. It has to be a personal thing. People have to want to be good. People have to want to love. And the church just doesn't do that. So I'm not even getting to how the church betrayed me, and I've been rambling for 40 minutes. Okay, so born and raised in the church, went to Rick's College, the church school, and went on a 19-year-old mission, to New York, New York, and I came up with a record system idea on my mission there in New York, and the mission president then put me in the Bronx to with a couple of companions, McFarland and Baxter, and we were assigned specifically to fix the membership records, because all the previous missionaries, which were mostly the couple missionaries, the adult missionaries, they were just making it a bigger mess. The drawer in the bishop's cabinet was just filled with single papers of notes, and we had no clue as to what any of that was, and there was no way we were going to track all of that down. But we cleaned up the records. The branch got a new membership record registry, and so the Relief Society president and the Elders Quorum president were able to identify who was in their ward, branch, boundaries, and were able to set up home teaching and visiting teaching, and we were able to realize that, okay, we only need just a few more elders in order to become an official ward. And so there was a push by the missionaries in that area to look for more men to baptize so that they can become priesthood holders and then get elevated to a ward status. Turns out a couple years after my mission, the branch was split into 2 branches, so they couldn't do it. They couldn't find enough men, but lots and lots of women joining the church, especially young women, by certain missionaries who were baptizing a lot of young single women. But anyway, you know, if the women are still active in the church, good for them. But and so I come home, I get married to a woman who set me up to marry her. You know, I had already decided I was going to marry her and propose, but she took it upon herself to rush the marriage by lying to the bishop, and I'm like, huh? What? But the bishop then gave me an ultimatum: marry her or go back to your family. And so that was the magic word of, I'm going to marry her, because there was no way on heaven and earth that I was going to go back to my parents. So, and you got the background of that as to why I'm not going back with my parents. You know, my mom believed that if I walked out of the house fully dressed, but if I wasn't wearing a belt, I was naked. Literally naked, in my mom's thinking. She was serious about that. That's her mindset. I had to wear a belt. Pants weren't falling down, but in her mind, I had to wear a belt. You know, and so yeah, I'm not going back with my parents, so I married her. She took me up to Canada, where there are free babies, and Canada gives you money for having babies, and gives you money for being poor. Canada's great. You know, everybody here in America says, no, you must suffer and work hard to, you know, barely make it check by check. What? Canada takes care of their own. You know, and, you know, in Utah, you'd think that Utah would say, hey, we like families, we want people to have families, because we're a family values state, because of the religion that controls our state is a family values church. But then they're all about, we want raped women to have the baby so that we can put it up for adoption to a good Mormon household. The church was involved in adoptions. And then the gay rights came around, wanting to have marriage And the church said, okay, we're out of this, because we don't want gays to have babies that belong in Mormon households. That's their thinking. They're anti-gay. President Oaks said he's anti-abortion, anti-gay. So you know that's their thinking. You know that they claim that it's God's will, that that's the way God wants it. That women who are raped must have their baby and they must give it up for adoption to a good Mormon household. That's what they think Jesus wants. And so, yeah, yeah. And so I studied a lot about the church's scriptures, not about church history. That was one of my weak area, was church history. But I knew all about the scriptures. My degree at the university was in biblical studies, and this was the worldly biblical studies, so I learned about the documentary hypothesis. And I also took philosophy of science as the other half of my degree. And so I learned about the arguments that religion makes concerning God, the divine command theory, the divine design theory, creationist theory, and they're all bogus. Christians don't get it. You can't use unsound logic to present a position and expect people to conform, because it's your religious beliefs and people need to respect it. You know? You just don't get it. You can't compel people to accept unsound thinking. And yet that's what religion is doing now. The church is even in part of it. You know, you heard it yesterday. Spiritual knowledge is knowledge that cannot be proven by science. And science knowledge isn't always true. So you got to be careful. And that woman who I talked about commenting on my YouTube video, another one said, you need to listen to Elder Oaks. And so I replied with the link to my Elder Oaks video. And I have yet to hear back from her if she's ever going to come back. You know, Mormons just don't get it. Just because a prophet gives you an easy out that's unsound doesn't make it the easy out. That doesn't make it right and true. And so Elder Oaks, or President Oaks, was just a hypocrite. He's a judge. He knows better. And here he's trying to promote spiritual knowledge over scientific knowledge. That in the realm of spirituality and religion, anything goes as long as you feel that that'll help you out. And so then Mormons then are justified in taking away agency because it's spiritual knowledge. Science cannot understand and they can't prove it. Okay, so I also took Biblical Hebrew at the university and wanted to know how Joseph Smith translated the King Follett Discourse, the Hebrew text of the Bible. He gave a translation of Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, and no Mormon has ever figured it out. And Louis Zucker of the University of Utah gave a lecture at BYU where he said Joseph Smith is wrong to BYU students and faculty at BYU. Joseph Smith is wrong. You can obtain that document online. Louis Zucker. And Yeah, and so Mormons don't believe in Joseph Smith as a translator. You can look up Translation and Historicity of the Book of Abraham. John Gee wrote it. He throws the church under the bus. He throws Joseph Smith under the bus. And the church approved this as official statements from the church, because it's the Gospel Topic Essays on LDS.org. That's the church's official position that Joseph Smith was wrong. And so back then, the church didn't come out with those yet. And so I was trying to figure it out. Born and raised Mormon. I didn't know anything was wrong. And so I studied it. And I ended up discovering the origin of Paleo Hebrew. That it was changed when the Jews went into Babylon and then returned. They altered the Hebrew script with the Semitic phonemes. And so Hebrew became Semitic by influence with Babylon. But before that, Paleo Hebrew was more associated with Paleo Greek. The scripts are the same. And Greek adds a few more letters, but they're from Phoenician, so they're one and the same language. But yet scholars say, oh no, Hebrew is Semitic. The Israelites, they were Semitic. And it's self-fulfilling prophecy type stuff, reinforcing a preconceived idea, and everybody believes the scholars without checking for themselves. And here I am on the pioneer forefront of making the greatest discovery that the world has ever known, because of the alphabet. That's huge. And here I am figuring out its origins. And yeah, I've published books on it. One guy complained because he didn't like that I couldn't figure out how to get ancient scripts published on Amazon, because they don't have that font in their system. They don't recognize it. And so I had lots of problems trying to publish my ancient language books. And so people are complaining about it if you look at the reviews that are often negative, because I'm trying to figure out, how do I get these ancient scripts published so that everybody can read them. And I finally figured out that I need to make a picture of each letter, and that became quite a project in and of itself. And trying to make it small enough is also a problem in and of itself. And then the technology that you can shrink a picture once you put it on, I had to learn all that. But anyway, so here I am figuring out how Joseph Smith translated Genesis 1:1. And so I go to the church and say, hey, is there any information that the church has about this that I can confirm my theory with? And F. Michael Watson, who was the secretary to President Hinckley at the time, took it upon himself to speak in behalf of President Hinckley, and he instead went to BYU professors who told him, no, the tradition is that Hebrew is Semitic, and that the acronym theory of William Foxwell Albright is the dominant theory. I knew all that, and yet F. Michael Watson wasted my time with that reply about the tradition is this. And so I just sent my research to the church and hoped that it would be kept on file so that somebody who might stumble across it might look at it and go, oh, well, this is interesting. I'm going to study this. But instead, I find out later that F. Michael Watson created a troublemaker file in the church at church security. 36434 is the troublemaker file number. And what happened was that he then notified my singles ward, because I was divorced by then, my singles ward stake president, and told him to deal with me, which the alt-right conservative mind says, oh, we need to excommunicate him. And so I got called in to the stake president's office, and I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting. I'm going to get a calling that has to do with a stake position. And I had gotten that in Canada, because outside of Utah, faithful Mormons get elevated quickly. And so I had a stake position. It was the physical facilities representative, which was a stake position up in Canada. And so, yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to be given a stake calling. And I get there, and it's a tiny room, and the stake presidency were all in there, and my whole bishopric was in there. And I thought, okay, now something is weird. Something doesn't seem right. And sure enough, they immediately attack me. Who have you told? You know, are you trying to destroy the church? And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And the stake president explained, President Hinckley has asked us to find out what your intentions are. And he was very upset about the document you gave him. And I said, I didn't say I don't think. It was President Hinckley didn't see the document. And that shocked them all. How dare you? And sure enough, the stake president then said, well, I'm going to go downtown to meet with President Hinckley himself and find out what's going on. Which revealed that, no, President Hinckley did not order them to excommunicate me. It was F. Michael Watson. So they fell for that trap in questioning. But my bishop, during that whole time, he was trying to find accusation against me. And the way he tried to do it was saying, I saw you pass from taking the sacrament, and everybody knows that when you pass taking the sacrament, that means you feel guilty for something you've done wrong. And I'm like, whoa, what are you talking about? And the stake president brushed him off. But, oh man, that is the alt-right conservative Mormon mindset. It's like, we've got to find something on this person so that we can justify doing things to him, controlling his will, taking away his agency, punishing him. That's how they think here in Utah. That's what everybody outside of Utah knows about and are terrified of the Mormons here in Utah. That's how horribly evil they are here. And so, yeah, the stake president never got back to me. He sent his counselor, who told me, you can continue your research. Just don't go against the church. I proved Joseph Smith was right, and they're still in denial. And so then later on, I get another bishop in the singles ward, and he confesses when we're cleaning the church, that he's never read the Book of Mormon. I'm not a scholar like you. I've never read the Book of Mormon. He's a bishop, and he hasn't even read the Book of Mormon. And so then he goes and makes all sorts of new laws for his branch, the singles branch. And the singles are freaking out. Oh man, he's going loco, you know. He's locking the doors, keeping people out from partaking of the sacrament. He's making sure that the bread is only white bread, and that people who are glucose intolerant can't get some alternative. And he's just going nuts. And the stake president refuses to do anything about it. You know, what? He self-confessed. He didn't even read the Book of Mormon. He doesn't know anything about it, which means he doesn't know the doctrine of the church. And if he obviously hasn't read the Doctrine and Covenants because of all the changes he was making to the sacrament. And it's just unbelievable. And the stake president keeps him in. And so I'm, you know, being abused by the single women who want me to stick with my own kind, which means divorced women. And I said, enough with this. I'm fed up. I'm out of here. I went back to my family ward, but I couldn't be active in my family ward, one, because I'm forced to live with my parents because of the divorce. And the bishop in that ward was elevated to a counselor in the stake presidency. And that bishop aided and abetted my wife in leaving me. He gave her a blessing. And my wife at that time believed from that blessing that she had permission to leave me, kidnap my kids, and leave the country. That's the Mormon alt-right conservative mindset. It's okay to kidnap and flee the country when the husband isn't giving you prosperity, because the economy won't let husbands do that. That's their thinking. And so, yeah, I hid in the back at church because I was not welcome there. I was not welcome in church anymore. Not in the singles ward, not in the family ward. I tried to go where the ward for my post office box was, but the bishop told me, no, you got to stick with your residence. You can't go to other wards. And so I was trapped. I had no church to go to. I belonged nowhere. And so I only had the temple. I still had some time on my temple recommend before it needed to be renewed, so I was going to the temple every day. And one day I show up and all the temple workers know me by name. They had hope for the future of the church because of me going to the temple every day. And one day I go in as normal and my recommend was flagged. I was shocked. The guy at the front desk was shocked because he knew me. He knew I was faithful. And the temple president said, yeah, your bishop flagged it. There's nothing I can do. Sorry. You have to go through him. And it was a singles ward bishop. Because I was not attending his branch, he took my temple recommend away. I was going to the family ward, but he took it upon himself to take my temple recommend away. And so I complained to Elder Bateman of the 70, the presidency of the 70, and complained to him, and he sent me to my family stake president. And the stake president gave me a can of nuts. And I just looked at that and thought to myself, okay, he's trying to symbolically tell me something. And sure enough, he made promises that he never kept. He was going to find out what's going on. He was going to get me my temple recommend back. and get me restored and blah, blah, blah. And he failed. He didn't do it. He had no intention. And so there I am, stuck with my parents and isolated from the church. And yeah, the church betrayed me. And so when the bishop in this local ward that I'm in now said that I cannot post that the Book of Mormon is the official doctrine of the church, I said, I'm out. That's it. And so I finally got around to studying church history, and that's it. No more church. I now know the truth. I did the research. I got the evidence. Brigham Young was not authorized. Brigham Young was involved in the plot to overthrow Joseph and have him murdered. You know, yes, I found out the Book of Mormon is not a translation from an Egyptian document. I also found out that the Book of Mormon is not accurate history. It's fiction. It's plagiarized fiction. But the Book of Mormon is a warning for us. It talks about how to behave in a loving manner. Not taking away agency, but actually having love for all mankind. Loving the earth so that we don't destroy our resources and cause destruction that is about to occur. And it's a warning of a future coup in the United States, in the government. They warn, do not let a king in the presidency. Story of the Kingmen. It's all through symbolism, and it's in a fiction tale, but it's a warning for us in this year. They were warning about Trump. Joseph Smith found out about that plot to destroy America way back then in 1830. It's actually 1826. And so here we are. Mormons are alt-right conservative, taking away agency and doing exactly what the Book of Mormon warned us and Mormons about. And so that's how the church betrayed me. And Mormons instead are so hard-hearted that they give me thumbs down on all of my videos pointing out the corruption of the church, the abuse of the church, the changes in doctrine of the church. They refuse to seek the truth. They'd rather stick with their tribe and continue to follow the bad examples of the leaders and being bad themselves, just like King Noah and his people. That direct connection. Leaders bad, justifying the people to be bad also. Just like with Trump. And there we are. And now Trump controls the government. Every branch of government. And he won't give that up. He will not allow Democrats to win in this midterms. You can be riled up all you want to get out and vote and have others get out and vote and express their anger by voting Democrat. But it'll all be vain. Trump will not allow it. He's got Russia to back him up. And just like the Book of Mormon says, with King Benjamin, or not, King Mosiah, talking about corrupt kings. You can't get rid of a corrupt king once he's on the throne. Because you only get rid of him through bloodshed. And that's what we're witnessing. You know, we're being played thinking that, oh, Mueller will have his investigation and he'll save us. No. Trump just got Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. Trump will take the investigation to the Supreme Court and overturn it. Make it null and void and worthless. Trump will remain president for life now. Civil war is our destiny. That is the only way we will have freedom. That is the only way we will have agency, justice, rights. And when we have the Civil War, all of the military and police forces will be turned on the people who are just trying to petition for a redress of grievances. We already see it. People are denied petitioning for a redress of grievances, so they protest. And protesters are being arrested as criminals for protesting because they're denied the right to petition for a redress of grievances. And as we've seen in our history, when you can't petition for redress and you can't protest, you know, the government wants us to submit and become slaves and be silent. And that's what the majority seems to be doing, is we get silenced. The civil rights, we got the amendments passed, but for the most part, America got silenced. Because women still didn't have equality with men. Blacks still don't have equality with white men. They got silenced. And now it's re-emerging with Trump. And we're watching how the government silenced the previous civil rights movements and how they're doing it now. And it's going to lead to war unless we just submit and give in, give up. Nothing we can do. I guess I'll just be a slave. Is that what you guys want? You know, Shakespeare had a quote about, I'd rather, let's see, I'd rather die than live with the harness on my back, something like that. I can't remember the exact quote, especially the wording that he uses. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's what America is now forced with. Do we want freedom? Or do we want slavery? Because we're slaves right now. Like I said, ransom economics. That's what we're in. Our nation is collapsed. We're in ruins. And people just don't realize it because they still get a paycheck. You know, they get bribed to remain silent. Because that's what your paycheck is. It's bribery to remain silent and conform. Because if you stand up for your rights, you lose your job. And you can't support a family. That's the threat, the ransom threat. And so, you know, we're going to have conference here in a couple hours. And it might take a couple hours to upload this video because it's over an hour. But this is America, and it's not America. The Founding Fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence, demanding freedom, declaring war against England, Britain. And then they created the preamble, and wrote the Constitution, and we have never followed it since. And law after law emerged to overturn the Constitution. And now we're facing the consequences, and destruction is coming. If we remain slaves, there will be natural disasters that will destroy us, and maybe other countries that will attack us. Or we can fight for our civil rights in a civil war. That's where we are.